Hi, my name is Raquel Terán. I am director of Proyecto Progreso. And today you will hear from trusted voices in Arizona the importance of knowing your constitutional rights. You will hear from Attorney General Kris Mayes, Executive Director of the ACLU, Victoria Lopez, and our trusted immigration attorney, Juliana Manzanares. We believe it's important to live prepared and not alarmed. Prepare for a great night.
Welcome. Today we're speaking with three leaders who work every single day to protect immigrant families and to help people understand their rights. The objective today is to cut through the noise, through the misinformation, so you can walk away informed. Today, we'll hear from Victoria Lopez from the ACLU on due process, from immigration attorney Juliana Manzanares, and from Arizona State Attorney General Kris Mayes. So, Victoria, I do want to begin with you because so much of what we're going to be talking about today deals with due process. So can you explain what that is? What is due process in plain language? And why is that important in a functioning democracy?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Elvia. So due process is one of the fundamental principles, one of the fundamental pieces of our democracy and of our Constitution. There are a lot of rights and in the Constitution, and it's so important for people to remember that the Constitution is for all of us, regardless of your citizenship status. So non-citizens and citizens alike have rights under the United States Constitution. Due process is one of those rights under our Constitution, and it is fundamental. It essentially says that people should be afforded fairness, right? That means that people should have their day in court. They should be heard by a judge. They should be able to appeal a case if they disagree with that case. Due process means that people can access the justice system in this country in a way that is fair and that is equitable. And due process is also together with rights like the right to be free from unlawful searches, from unlawful arrests, from the freedom to speak, to free speech and to dissent when you oppose something that the government is doing. So the Constitution is a critical foundation of this country that is meant to protect the rights of all people in Arizona and across this country.
And by that, you really mean people who just live here in the United States, right? You did mention regardless of immigration status, but just to be clear, undocumented immigrants are protected under the Constitution as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we do know your rights information presentations across the state, it is super important for undocumented immigrants, for non-citizens, for citizens, for all of us to understand those very important protections that we all have under the Constitution and under the laws of the United States, so that when we have these moments as we have currently under this administration, we know how we show up as a community to protect our rights.
Well, let's talk about those moments because realistically, those are very scary. We have seen masked agents, just go into homes and take people. What can a person in that frightening moment do to protect themselves and protect their rights?
It's really scary, undoubtedly, and it's important for all of us across our state and across our country to recognize that we are really in a moment that is so unprecedented, so harsh and aggressive, particularly toward immigrant communities in our country. It is scary, and that means that it is all the more important for people to understand what the limits of the government are when they do have rights, and importantly, how to exercise those rights. It's also so important for communities, whether they are school communities, faith communities, leaders across sectors, business, across the entire spectrum of leaders in this country, to be able to stand up and help protect those rights, because the rights belong to all of us. And unless we have structures and systems in place to be able to exercise those rights, they become meaningless. And so we're in this critical moment when we're seeing these horrific images on video, on photo, in the media, of families being kidnapped, of children being separated from their families, of people being unlawfully arrested. These images should spur us all to action and to defend the rights that we all have under our laws.
So you mentioned that it's important for people to understand the limits of government. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that?
Sure. The Constitution is very clear, right? When we talk, for example, in our Know Your Rights presentations about the importance of judicial warrants, right? Judicial warrants are an important piece, a legal document that instructs the government, law enforcement, when they can and can't arrest someone, when they can and can't enter somebody's home or somebody's property. And so those kinds of limits are really important for the public to be aware of, because if we're talking about knowing our rights, we also have to know whether we're asking for a warrant, whether we can allow somebody to search our car, whether that person is lawfully arrested under the law. So those kinds of limits are also a really important part of the Know Your Rights education.
That's incredibly important. And how can they know that it's a legal document? I have seen agents, just kind of dangle the documents, but sometimes it's not even signed. How can someone make sure that the document is legal, especially when they are, again, very scared?
Sure. It's not to diminish the scariness of these moments. We have seen incredible bravery and incredible strength in people, in families, in communities, coming to each other's aid and protection in these incredibly scary and horrifying moments in someone's life. And it's hard, right? But what we've also seen is people recording, people documenting incidents after they've happened, and that has been incredibly helpful for litigation to defend people's rights in courts, whether it's an individual immigration case or it's a large-scale impact case challenging the government's actions. And so that kind of documentation in those moments is so critically important. Knowing your rights, knowing what to say, knowing what to look for if somebody comes to your door with a warrant, or maybe it's not a warrant, and then having people around you, whether it's your community, your neighbors, your family, knowing what those rights are and what they can do in that moment, like recording the incident, like taking notes afterward, being in touch with attorneys or trusted community members who can also help somebody navigate that process, are critically important, especially during these times.
Is that the most effective way to record when someone's rights are being violated, and to document and report it? So using a phone to record, is it the most effective way to do it?
I mean, we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing people, recording incidents of, all over the country of law enforcement activity against immigrants, against immigrant communities, against U.S. citizens and people who even have lawful status in this country. So being able to record and knowing, how to record, again, in that moment, sometimes people may feel really afraid, and so it's important to have the discussions and have those networks and that education to be able to do that type of documentation if and when that type of incident happens.
Can you briefly give me some concrete examples about what to say if someone is facing that kind of a situation?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, but in those moments, right, like there are the questions of like, do you have a warrant? Who does that warrant, who is listed on that warrant? Does the warrant allow the law enforcement officer to enter the home or not? Can I see the warrant without opening the door, but being able to show it either through a window or slipping it through someplace so that the person can actually see what is listed in that particular warrant? Other things people can say, right, are that they want to speak to an attorney, right? They can also say that they want to remain silent. These are protections under the Constitution that every person should be familiar with and should be ready to exercise if they find themselves in a moment like that.
So there's also power in showing up at town halls, at hearings, at protests. What can the community help? And you sort of mentioned that at the beginning, right? But what can the community do right now that is meaningful?
Yeah, there are so many things, and it has been remarkable, truly remarkable to see the way that people are showing up for each other and their communities in these moments. I mean, we've seen, anything from Know Your Rights presentations at schools and churches and community centers. We've seen people showing up at protests, whether they're large-scale protests or smaller protests in their communities, to be able to exercise their disagreement with what the government is currently doing. And there have been other ways that people have been supporting each other through mutual aid, helping make sure that children can get to school safely, helping to make sure that neighbors can get their groceries. All of these things are really important to make sure that, again, we are reinforcing that the Constitution and our laws belong to all of us, and that we're all here to make sure that we can be safe and we can be dignified in our lives and have our rights respected.
Now, what's the danger of staying silent, especially here in Arizona? We have had a long history of SB 1070, of the Miranda rights, back in the day. So tell us about the danger of the community of not doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully we're not in that moment. I mean, we have seen so much activity, so thankfully we are in a moment where people are willing to step up. The danger, of course, is that, then we are in a moment where we are frozen, right, against some of the horrific behavior that we're seeing from the Trump administration. We do have a long history, and we've seen that here in Arizona. Over the course of many decades now, we have seen people fighting for their rights under the anti-immigrant SB 1070 that was passed several decades ago. We have seen communities standing up against the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office to make sure that they're not being racially profiled during traffic stops. And we have seen a long legacy of resistance in the state of Arizona against this type of anti-immigrant and xenophobic and unlawful behavior by law enforcement agencies in particular. And so I think we will continue to see that type of resistance in the state, and not just resistance, but also supporting communities across the state.
That's such an important thing to do, right? In 30 seconds, what would you tell the community right now that they must do, and also the immigrant community?
It takes courage to be together in this moment. It takes courage to stand up to the kind of behavior, unlawful behavior that we are seeing out of the Trump administration. And so I would encourage people to be courageous in being together, whether that's in your school community, your faith community, your work community, wherever those spaces exist. It really is going to take all of us to be together to be able to fight against this.
Well, thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Elvia.
So now we're going to move into the more practical, the day-to-day decisions that people have to make with documents, deadlines, legal advice. And for that, we're turning to immigration attorney Juliana Manzanares. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we know that people get their information from TikTok, from TV, from WhatsApp, and from rumors.
Yeah.
A lot of that is going on. What's the best way for someone to get trustworthy legal advice?
Well, the first thing would be to talk to a licensed attorney. They're the ones that can actually legally give legal advice that you can take. The other option is to talk to a trusted nonprofit. A lot of the communities that I've seen and nonprofits that work with them have attorneys that look over their information, that are vetted. They are giving true information. I don't want to say don't listen to social media at all, because sometimes that is how news is out there. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of don't rely solely on social media.
And it's effective, right? I mean, to that point. And that's a question that I also have for the Attorney General. How do you know when an attorney is a trusted attorney?
Well, I'm going to leave that to the Attorney General. But generally, there are questions that people can ask and red flags that should be able to be identified. But what I always tell people, especially when I'm out in the communities giving Know Your Rights or other presentations, is go to these community organizations. They have trusted attorneys already that they've worked with, that they've vetted. And if anything goes wrong, believe me, they're going to be the first ones to tell you, don't go there.
So what are some of those red flags?
Well, the main thing is, are you a licensed attorney? I think that's the biggest thing. Especially with immigration work, you don't actually have to be licensed in the state that you live in. So it's important to ask, are you licensed, and what state are you licensed in? Because most bar associations, you're able to look up that person and see if they have any disciplinary infraction or record that might, influence your decision.
And what if you ask that question and the person lies, says, yes, I'm a licensed attorney, then what?
Well, that's why you want to ask what state they're licensed in. And then at that point, you can go on the internet and make sure that they actually are licensed. And if they're not, you probably don't want to be there.
So you see a lot of fear and confusion, I bet, on a daily basis. So which groups are most vulnerable right now with the shifting policies?
Well, I think most vulnerable is probably mixed status families, people that have orders of deportation that maybe don't know they have orders of deportation. That's a really big one. I think some students, some people that have overstayed their visas, those are probably the most vulnerable. But I also want to say, yes, there's a lot of confusion and fear, but there's also a lot of courage that I'm seeing and joy.
So families worried about emergencies, kids at school, documents at home, sudden detentions. I bet you see a lot of those, unfortunately. What does a solid family emergency plan looks like?
So first, it's talking to that licensed attorney. Every case is different. There is going to be one fact that is going to throw off an entire case compared to your friend, to your neighbor, your loved one, the person that you see on TikTok, right? So that's step one. You have to know your case and what options are available for you. Then you want to have a place where you have all of your important documents, IDs, passports, proof of residency, your kids' information. And kids' information, I mean, where do they go to school? Who's going to pick them up? Do they have any allergies? What doctors do they go to? And then making sure that there's a third party that knows where to look for these documents, because a lot of the times the parents will have these documents and then nobody knows where to find them. And I think that's probably the most important, is know where to find those.
And have them in a
folder.
Easy place, in a folder.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So people are just intimidated about asking questions to attorneys, I bet. And we already went through, what do you ask an attorney? So what do you ask ICE, for instance? What would be your advice for anyone encountering that kind of situation? Any other questions that people listening or watching should be asking attorneys and ICE or any other law enforcement, for that matter, before signing anything?
Sure. So a couple things. I think it kind of depends on when you're encountering this law enforcement. We just heard all about due process and knowing the rights that you can say that. So those are all very valid questions. I think one of the things, especially if it's not ICE, is can I leave? Am I being arrested? Am I being detained? Once you are detained, I think the number one thing that people need to ask is, can I talk to my consulate? One, because that is information where the family member can get information about them quicker. Two, can I have copies of everything that you're giving me? And if they say that it's an order of deportation, who gave this to me? Are you giving it to me, or is it a judge? And then the last one, do I have a right to see an immigration judge?
And what's the difference between being detained and being arrested?
Well, it depends on in my context, because in the criminal context, it's a little bit different. But for immigration, we don't have arrest because immigration is civil. So everything that's happening with ICE is a detention. It's not an arrest. So for us is, am I being detained and can I go? And at that point, the same things apply. If they say, yes, you're being detained, well, then you're going to be detained. But if not, that's when you want to invoke your right to remain silent and ask those questions if they do have a warrant, if that's what the situation calls for.
And talking about remaining silent, doing nothing can ruin a case, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's
very much so.
And that seems to be an important aspect of what you do. What are the most common mistakes people make when they delay or ignore immigration letters, hearings, courts, or deadlines?
Well, if you don't show up to an immigration court hearing, that's an automatic deportation order. So not going will get you deported faster than going to any of your hearings and fighting a case and submitting an application. That's why it's important to show up at every single one. The other thing is that if you wait too long, sometimes attorneys can't help you. These cases can take months or years to prepare. And if people wait, for example, a week before your hearing, it might be hard to find somebody to help you through that process. This system is complicated on purpose. And I think that's why the sooner that you can go talk to a licensed attorney that can help you with those processes, then the more comfortable one would feel going into these hearings, going into these interviews, and really being prepared for that case.
What I see as a journalist is that if you go to an immigration court hearing, you're going to be deported, especially now. Is that so?
No. We're not seeing that here in Phoenix. We did see it at the beginning of the year, but it wasn't a deportation, it's a detention. And I want to make that clear. A detention is not a deportation. Can it lead to a deportation? Sure, but there's a process that ICE still has to follow, even in these harsh times. So are there people that maybe their case will go quicker than others? Yes, but that's also why it's important to know your options specifically for you and your family. But right now, we're not seeing the detentions at the immigration court as much as we would see across the country.
And again, this question is going to be for the Attorney General as well, but the notarios públicos that I hear so much about. Do you ever have clients that tells you, well, I already did this work with the notario público, and how important it is to know the difference between the two?
I do. That is a good amount of people. I will say that document preparers, legal document preparers that are certified by the court do have a position in our legal system. Hiring an attorney is expensive. I think, though, where we get into trouble is when these document preparers are giving legal advice, which they cannot do. And sometimes if they're filling out these forms and applications, there might be an error, and then there's no way to get recourse or fix that error later.
So if someone is undocumented and has no way to apply for any kind of legal status, but still encounters immigration or law enforcement, you still recommend that that person gets an attorney?
Absolutely. So there's two things. There's affirmative applications where I qualified to become a resident and submit my application, and then there's always a defense. And you don't know what you qualify for until you talk to somebody that's been doing it, that knows the in and outs, that knows the judges, that knows the system. And so information is power. And that's why I say you may not be able to do anything now, but you never know what that defense could be. And sometimes that defense is when people invoke their rights, because that now can help an immigration case as well.
And you mentioned that the system is complicated by design.
Correct, it is.
How different it is to practice immigration law under the Trump administration compared to previous administrations?
I think there were issues on all administrations. I'm not going to give any presidential administration a pass here. I think what we're seeing, though, is because half of the laws can be, half of the laws are who's in the executive and who's in the White House. Those changes that can happen every day are notices of rulemaking that then send people into a panic that aren't even here yet. That's what makes it hard. It's the uncertainty of certain things, and priorities change. Under the Biden administration, there was a tiered system of who was a priority of who was going to be detained. Now we don't have that.
So how do you navigate that?
We be honest with people. We give them the correct information. We listen to what their fears are. We know their background, and we tell them this is what can happen in your case. That's the only way. The more informed you are, the less fear you can have, or the better prepared you can be.
So, and finally, anything that you tell anyone that needs an attorney in terms of finding one and finding the correct attorney for that person. It's not the first attorney that you hear you're going to sign up a contract. We have a few seconds left. So what would you say are the three things that they must do before hiring an attorney?
Well, I would say talk to your community organizations. They have those attorneys that are already trusted, so they've done a lot of the legwork for you. Second, you want to see how much experience this person has with that specific type of case. And third, go talk to at least 3 attorneys. If all 3 are telling you the same, that's probably the same thing. But if there's one that's promising you the world, that might be a red flag.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Arizona Attorney General Kris Mayes has gotten national attention for the multiple lawsuits that she has filed against the Trump administration. But an incredibly important role that your office plays, and you, is actually consumer fraud. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So scammers prey on fear and uncertainty, as we have been talking. What are the most common immigration-related scams that you are seeing across Arizona, or you're not seeing any?
Oh, we're definitely seeing these scams, and you're absolutely right, Elvia. These scammers and fraudsters are unfortunately preying on our immigrant community here in Arizona and really across the country. And it's my job as the Attorney General to protect all Arizonans, regardless of their immigration status. We do not want anyone to fall victim to these scammers or to lose money as they try to navigate the immigration system, as they try to deal with situations like the ones you were just talking about with our immigration experts. And what we are seeing, for instance, is these scammers claiming to be immigration lawyers when they're actually not. I mean, the American Bar Association has already said that they have uncovered at least a dozen, maybe more, instances of basically fake immigration lawyers claiming to work for the ABA, the American Bar Association. So our number one tip that we're asking people to do is make sure that when you hire a lawyer, that person is actually a lawyer. Go to azbar.org to just verify that the person you are talking to is actually licensed in the state of Arizona. And then the last thing I'll say is these scammers are going to great lengths to steal money from our communities, including we've heard situations where the scammer posing as a notario or a lawyer. As you know, in many Latin American countries, notario is a lawyer, not necessarily here in the United States, but they even have had fake courtroom backgrounds set up behind them on Zoom screens. So making it look like they're actually in a courtroom when they're not, to try to scam people.
You say not necessarily, or attorneys, so it does mean some attorneys are notarios. So I think that's where the confusion comes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really important. I mean, to make sure that yes, I mean, certainly attorneys can have notary publics working for them. They can themselves be a notary public, but as one of our other guests said, just make sure when you're getting legal advice, it's from an actual licensed attorney. That's really important.
And you did mention where to go. You gave the website where people can check. But if they're doing an interview, how can they know, or what kind of questions can they ask on the spot to know that that the person is an attorney, not a notario público, and any advice that you have before people pay thousands of dollars?
Yeah, so definitely get their bar license. That's one thing, and their full name, so you can check that against the records at AZ Bar.
And everyone is required to have a bar
I have
license.
a bar license, for instance. And so, yes, everybody has a bar license, and then you can check that. You can check that against the records at the Arizona State Bar. And then the other thing, that some other tips that we give to people are, when you're talking to a lawyer or a notario or anybody who's giving you or saying they're giving you legal advice, don't ever sign a document with blank spaces in it. Make sure that you always keep your original documents and records. Make sure you get a receipt from the person that you are getting services from. So if you're talking to a lawyer, make sure you get a receipt from them if you've paid them. And never ever pay in cryptocurrency. Don't pay in Bitcoin. Don't pay in gift cards. Try not to pay in cash. Pay in a way that if you are scammed, you can get the money back, for instance, from a credit card company. Or don't pay through a wire transfer either. Don't pay in a way that is very, very hard to trace. That's what these scammers will do, is try to get you to pay in a way that's hard to trace. And then, just make sure that you nail down that you're talking to a real lawyer.
Are people really paying with Bitcoin?
Yeah, they are.
They
Believe
are.
it or not. I mean, and we see this across a lot of different kinds of scams. Is they will ask. There are two things that a scammer will commonly do to you, and this holds for the immigration space as well. Number one, they'll try to rush you. If you feel like the person you're talking to is rushing you. And number two, they'll try to get you to, like I said, to pay in a way that can't be traced. So we also don't use apps like PayPal or Zelle. Again, it's harder to get your money back if you're using those kinds of apps to pay.
So you recommend a check, or what are the recommendations here?
Checks, credit cards, those types of services where you can, go to the entity and get your money back if you have been scammed.
So some victims are afraid to report fraud, and sometimes even when you're not a victim, you get embarrassed or you just don't want to do it, but especially among the immigrant community, because there's a fear to get in touch with a law enforcement agency, and you are the Attorney General of Arizona. So how can someone report safely to your office and don't fear that they are connecting with the top law enforcement officer of the state?
Yeah, well, they can know, and I say this always loud and clear, that you can come and report being a victim of a crime or having been scammed to my office, regardless of your immigration status. We will not ask you about it, and we want to know. And we can't help you if you don't let us know. And I understand that fear. I understand that people, probably see my office and say, well, that's the Attorney General's office. Is that going to get me deported? No, it's not. We're not going to ask you about your immigration status. We want to know whether you've been victimized by these scammers, so that we can help you get your money back, so that we also can go after those scammers. And these are criminals. They are stealing money from people in Arizona, and it's my job to be the top law enforcement officer for everyone in this state.
Now, earlier we were talking with the immigration experts about how action looks like in terms of the immigration and the immigrant community. Overall, what have you done to remain active and to protect these families, if anything at all?
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, I was the first politician in Arizona to come out and say that what ICE is doing with its masking policy is outrageous. Real lawmen and real lawwomen do not wear masks. This is ridiculous. When I talk to police chiefs and sheriffs throughout Arizona, when I talk to my own investigators and police officers who work for me, they say to me, Kris, we don't wear masks. This is not what real law enforcement does. And so I am encouraging, in every chance I get, the federal government to knock this off. They are making our state less safe. They are making it harder for people to feel comfortable talking to law enforcement. They are making it harder for our communities to report crimes. And so that's not good. And anybody in law enforcement outside of the federal government right now will tell you that. So, and then the other thing that we've done is we have given advice and guidance to our schools about if there is ICE around, or if ICE tries to come to the school, The schools do not have to allow ICE in without a judicial warrant. You were talking earlier about judicial warrants and different kinds of warrants. This is very important. I want, as the Attorney General of Arizona, I want our kids to feel safe in their schools. At a bare minimum, that should be the case. And they should not have to worry about ICE lurking or Border Patrol lurking around our schools, coming into our schools. That is just not okay and not appropriate. And so we've given advice to our school superintendents and school principals about what they do and don't have to do if ICE tries to enter a school building. And they do not have to allow them in without a judicial warrant.
You have been criticized for all the lawsuits that you have filed against against President Trump and the administration, including what you are talking about, giving that advice to local schools. Why do you feel that is important, and why do you feel that is your role?
Yeah, I mean, I've sued Donald Trump 30 times. Tomorrow it'll be 31. And so, I believe deeply that our immigrant communities make Arizona what we are. I mean, they are so important to our state. They're important to the future of this state. My own daughter has been learning Spanish since she was 3 years old and has been in a Spanish immersion school since she was 3 years old. She's now 12 and a half. We are going to get through this terrible time in our nation's history. Hopefully it will only be 2 or 3 more years that we have to deal with this nonsense and this lawlessness coming out of Washington, D.C. But for as long as I'm the Attorney General, I'm going to stand up for our Constitution and for the people of Arizona and all of the people of Arizona.
With the time that we have left, anything else that you would like to make sure that the immigrant community and their advocates need to know and need to do?
Yeah, I just remember we want you to definitely, as earlier guests said, reach out, make sure that you are getting legal advice. But when you do that, make sure that you're not also getting scammed, because we are seeing these efforts to defraud our immigrant communities. It's a crime of opportunity. Because so many people are having to deal with this situation right now. So many people are facing potential deportation or detentions, and we just want to make sure that they're getting good legal advice and they're not getting fraudulent legal advice.
And finally, in 30 seconds, what's your message to the non-immigrant community? What can they do to help?
I think stay closely connected to each other, continue to talk to each other, know that you have an attorney general and a governor who will do everything that we can to protect the rights of all Arizonans, to protect the constitutional rights of everyone who lives here. We haven't talked about it yet, but if Donald Trump tries to deploy the National Guard or the military to Arizona, in violation of posse comitatus, I will fight it. I will sue him the same way that the attorneys general of Oregon and California and Illinois have done and have had to do. We're just, unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see these efforts by the federal government through ICE and Border Patrol to and even the military to threaten and intimidate people. And we will fight that here in Arizona.
I'm going to steal 30 more seconds on that because that's very important. Do you foresee that happening?
I mean, I think it's entirely possible, and I think we have to be ready for it. I hope not. I certainly hope not. But, now they've gone into North Carolina, and that's a swing state like Arizona, I think it's entirely possible. It's now happened in almost a half a dozen states. So we have to be prepared for that. I will tell you, we are preparing for that.
Legally speaking, right?
Legally. We're legally, from a legal standpoint, we are preparing in my office to do what we have to do to fight it if that comes to our state. But I certainly hope not. But, and I also think we have to be prepared for an escalation of ICE and Border Patrol the way they've done in Chicago and Charlotte, Portland, and LA.
All right, well, thank you so much. We'll have to leave it at that. The Attorney General of Arizona, Kris Mayes, and thank you to the two other panelists. Knowing your rights is power. You don't have to face these challenges alone. You have people here that are fighting for you. So stay connected, stay informed. Thank you.